All right, we're rolling. Joey.
Yes, sir.
It's been a long time. We've been trying to do this for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So you are an author, former federal prosecutor, and a judge, correct?
And a former state prosecutor also.
Former state prosecutor.
And federal, yes.
Okay. What's the difference between a federal and state?
A state prosecutor is usually known as an assistant district attorney, and then they enforce state laws, which is the vast majority: murder, robbery, rape. Those are all local state laws. Federal prosecutors enforce federal laws, and those usually involve mail fraud. They have an element of crossing state lines.
Okay.
Trying to kill the president's a federal crime. Stealing mail is a federal crime. Distributing drugs that are imported from out of the country is a federal crime, and so on.
You're also an author. So you're an author of 3 books, all available on Amazon: From Darkness, Light, and Sunday Morning Coming Down. And the newest one is A Fiery Dusk, right?
That's the most recent. The newest will be released in about a month, and that's called When the Sun Doesn't Rise. So, yes, I had 3 published, and the 4th is on the way.
We're just talking off camera that they're written in a novel. So there's some fiction, but the case stuff is real.
Yeah, they're reality based. The cases that are discussed, almost all of them, are actual cases that I prosecuted. How they're prosecuted is 100% authentic, and I think that's what separates them from other books, is that I actually have handled these cases and know exactly how they're done.
So let's go back. When you got out of high school, you went to college to be a lawyer?
No, actually, I studied economics and I was pondering a PhD and a career in academia. Yeah. But at the last minute, I changed my mind and decided to go to law school. I thought it'd be more financially secure, so I went to law school.
And when you got out, what was your first job, or how did it go?
When I went to law school, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but you take different courses, and they're very different. And I found myself drawn to criminal law, constitutional law, evidence, excuse me, and I took a trial advocacy, which prepares you how to try a case course, and I found that I loved it. So I decided I wanted to do criminal, and I wanted to try cases in front of a jury, and naturally that would be where you do that the most is as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
So I became a prosecutor right out of law school.
I talk about this a lot. Like one of the hardest things for me in college was public speaking. Mm-hmm. Especially in doing film, like you have to get up and support your artwork and back and answer questions. I imagine you're doing a lot of public speaking as a lawyer. Did that come easy for you? As natural? Because some people have this like swagger,
Mm-hmm.
They're just good on their feet.
Well, there's lawyers and there's trial lawyers.
Okay.
And amongst the trial lawyers, there's a whole variety of them. All of them have one thing in common, though, if you're really a trial lawyer, is you're comfortable in a courtroom.
Okay.
And it's very weird because I am not a comfortable public speaker. If I had to go to a meeting at, let's say, a public library and discuss a local neighborhood issue, I'd be a little nervous about it.
Yeah.
But if I have to go do a capital murder trial, I have no reservations. Something about being in the courtroom, for me, and it's been like this from my very first trial, I don't experience the fear of public speaking, and I cannot explain it, never have been able to.
Is it because, I guess it's like you feel like more of responsibility, right? You're doing like a job, so it doesn't...
It could be tied to responsibility and the knowing that you're prepared and that people are looking to you for leadership, mm-hmm. especially when you're a prosecutor. They expect a lot from you.
Yeah. So, and you were raised in Houston, born in Houston, and so was that where you were doing a lot of the cases from?
I ended up in San Antonio, and I was with the Bexar County DA's office, and I did a pretty long stint there and did a whole bunch of violent crimes there. And after a while, somebody urged me to check into jumping over to the feds, which is a lot harder to get on with. They have more of an elite reputation, and they're more selective. So it's hard to get on with them. But I wasn't sure I wanted to do it because I mainly did towards the end of as a state prosecutor, as assistant DA, was doing a lot of murders and capital murders and violent crimes, and I really, really enjoyed those kind of trials. I really enjoyed prosecuting very dangerous, violent people and sending them to prison and getting justice for their victims' families. And it would be a little different in federal court because you don't handle a whole lot of violent crime. But anyway, I eventually did. They offered me a position, and I took it. And so I went to the feds in 2000.
When you were dealing with a bunch of murders cases, and so reading the book, right? The character, I guess, is it based loosely off of yourself?
I didn't intend it to, but now in hindsight, so many people who have read it and who know me say, "Oh, it's clearly you." And I said, "No, it's not supposed to be me." But I think subconsciously, I relied on my experiences.
Yeah.
And you can't help but incorporate part of yourself into the main character when you're incorporating your own experiences. So, yeah, a lot of it is me.
How did you deal with having to, do a case like that's so gruesome and stuff, and all these cases are horrible, right? How do you deal with the stuff off of work? Do you have any vices in the book?
Yeah, let me tell you something. You deal with the absolute worst that man will do to man, and if you can imagine a gruesome crime, I've seen many of them. And some prosecutors were affected by it, some were not. I was always moved by this. Let's confine it to murders for now.
Okay.
I was always very, very much moved by the victim's surviving family.
Yeah.
I would always make it a point to reach out to them. And that's not really part of the job, but I always considered it a part of the job, but it's not official. And I would always reach out to them and let them know that they're going to be heard and that I'm going to seek justice. And I was always moved by their heartbreak.
Yeah.
And that you would think that'd be universal amongst prosecutors. It is not. Some prosecutors just are interested in the case, and they will say, "I'm not a social worker. I'm not a trial advocate." And I always found that very disturbing. So I wasn't like that. So how do I deal with it? I was, bothered by a lot of the cases. I think that I would derive a lot of satisfaction and gratification from winning consistently and getting long, harsh sentences for those who deserve them.
Yeah.
And the appreciation and gratitude of the surviving families went a long way in smoothing that for me. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't.
Yeah, I would imagine. I remember reading this interview with a medical examiner, and he talked about this. He talked about having to, constantly doing autopsies almost every day. He was developing this like a vice, and he would always go to fast food restaurants. He talked about how he would immediately leave work and just hit a fast food restaurant, eating a greasy hamburger, smelling the latex from his hands. So it was always interesting to me to think about, because just reading your book, right? There's some chapters I just put it down, geez, I'm gonna take a break for this, because just reading about it is pretty disturbing. There's one image from the beginning that stayed with me, is the image of this little girl, 16-year-old girl, with a bloodstained Hello Kitty T-shirt. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
That's a real case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, even the father was a drug dealer or not. That's still pretty tough.
I remember interviewing her. Yeah.
Well, what was that like?
It is, for me, and I don't consider myself an overly sensitive person or a touchy-feely type of guy.
Okay.
But I was very, like I say, I was very impacted by these cases in the families. Maybe, it may be because I come from, I have 8 brothers and sisters.
Oh, okay.
And we're very, very close. And our family was very, very close. And our cousins were very, very close. And so we come from a very strong, tightly knit family. Mm-hmm. And, and maybe that's what part of what it was. But I remember many, many times having to sit with the families, especially in this, with these really senseless, violent crimes. Mm-hmm. And it just was real hard. It was heart-wrenching, but I had a job to do.
Yeah.
I didn't become emotional. I was a little clinical about it, but deep down inside, I was feeling something different. I remember one case out there. That's the case you mentioned was very, very difficult because it involved a child who basically saw her father murdered in front of her. But I had another case one time where it involved a triple homicide. I don't think it was quadruple. I think it was a triple homicide where the victims were killed in a very, very horrible way by whacked out meth addicts who hadn't slept for a week and who got this deranged idea that they would go and rob these they were kids to me, 18, 20, 19-year-old girls and their friend who was a male, because they were convinced they had a lot of money. They had no money. Mm-hmm. So they went in there and they thought the effective way to kill them was to inject them with Windex. Now, that would only come from the mind of a whacked out person. Windex is a corrosive agent.
Okay.
Injecting someone with Windex is torturing them. So they lined them up one by one and took them in the back bedroom and would inject them. And of course, they didn't die from that. They just were tortured. And so they ended up cutting their throats. And they did that one by one until they'd finished the job and then made off with a VCR and a jar of change. So I had to meet with the families of those. I remember meeting with particularly the mothers of the...
1 second. We'll pause that.
Sounds like a cell phone.
Yep. Let me just put that on there. All right. Sorry about that.
Back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a couple seconds. I remember particularly meeting with the mothers of the young girls who had been murdered, and they were beautiful girls. They were dancers, and they lived that lifestyle, Mm-hmm. But they actually came from decent families. They just fell into that world. And I remember the mothers, and part of the problem was that these kids were killed, but were not found in a hot apartment for 3 days. So they were what we call decomposition cases, where they were basically in a horrible... You couldn't look at the pictures without throwing up, I assure you. They were so horrible. Well, they were unrecognizable almost as humans. They would decompose so bad. Anyway, I'm meeting with them, and I'm trying to be a listener and a peaceful presence for these devastated mothers, and meeting in my office. And I remember one of the mothers had a request, an insistent request, that I show her the picture of her daughter from the crime scene.
Yeah.
There is nothing in this world that would have convinced me or forced me to let her see her daughter in that condition.
Right.
because it was the last image she would have of an otherwise beautiful daughter who looked like a unimaginable non-human. And I had to, these are the conversations you would have to have, and I had to tell her, ma'am, and as gentle as I could, I can't do that. I'm not going to do it because I want you to remember your daughter for the beautiful girl that she was, not this.
Right.
And I convinced her, but these were, and I say that just to illustrate how some of these conversations could be so difficult. They were never easy, obviously. Some of them were especially hard when the victims had a hand whose hands weren't completely clean.
Okay.
You know, a drug dealer murdered a drug dealer who had agreed to engage in combat and came up on the losing end. These are not easy cases, and you would have to explain to the victim's family who saw their loved one as completely an innocent person, and sometimes you had to tell them the hard truths.
What is the deal with the photographs? I know. So, in the story you just told me, you said you're like, no, I'm not going to show you, right? Mm-hmm. But you have some case. Well, I mean, this is just my knowledge from TV, right, and documentaries and stuff. But these gruesome photos are used in court.
Yes.
And I would only imagine that they're used as a shock value for the jury to get on the prosecutor's side, or.
And you would be 100% right. Look, in a murder case, there's usually no dispute that the person is dead.
Right.
That's not an issue. So showing a picture of his body doesn't advance the ball at all. We already know he's dead, so we don't need to see what he looked like dead.
Okay.
However, decades and decades of tradition, and maybe from the beginnings of when murders are prosecuted, the law has said you cannot deprive the prosecution of its effective presentation of evidence, and you cannot deprive a jury from seeing what the defendant did with his hands, his handiwork.
Right.
So you hit a very good point. It's very inflammatory, but it's also an incredibly effective tool to the prosecution, almost to an unfair extent.
Yeah.
But it's never going to change. It's always going to be allowed.
As a judge, right, isn't that your call?
It is my call. It is my call. Let me tell you, I did hear murders when I was a judge. And in those cases, I would try to draw a compromise. I was not going to say that the jury is not going to see any pictures of the deceased. Mm-hmm. But I also wouldn't say we don't need to see 30 of them. We don't need to see 20 of them. Yeah. 2 will do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a hard one. Mm-hmm. Just having to deal with that. But I didn't know that, most prosecutors are just... They don't deal with families like that. It's just about the job. It's just about the money.
You know what? I don't know if it's a self-defense mechanism to remove themselves from their case. Mm-hmm. I just was surprised to the extent that I saw that.
Yeah,
and I can't speak for them or why, but I saw it.
The other thing that did well. There's a couple of things that stay with me. I want to talk about, but. One of them was and this is in the Fiery Dusk book, the woman who's working Christmas Eve, she gets shot by this guy, whacked out on whatever, mm-hmm. and, they go to trial, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, is there an intent? I'm not a murderer. I'm a robber. I meant to scare her. And then she got killed. Oh, but I'm not a murderer. Mm-hmm. I'm a robber.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like, I'm going to scare you with the gun, and then I kill you. But then in trial, in court, I'm a robber. I'm not a murderer.
Yeah. He didn't want to accept the consequences of what he did. And I mentioned you mentioned that case because I put it in the book, and I put some of the more memorable cases, and I will never forget that case because I described it 100% accuracy. I tried it with a real good friend of mine, Juanita Vasquez Gardner, who I've known for a long time, many years, and we tried a lot of murders today. I mean, in our time, we tried tons of murders together, and she and I just were perfect partners. But anyway, I remember working that case with her, and how extremely heartbreaking. All the details I mentioned, how she worked that extra shift on Christmas Eve because nobody else would, because she was a poor single mother struggling and wanted to buy presents for her children for Christmas. And this, heroin addict went in there. He claimed it was an accident. We never believed him. So Juanita and I went back to the crime scene and with a detective and basically recreated the crime scene and disproved that it was an accident. He says the gun went off as he pulled it out of his waistband. Mm-hmm. And you could tell by trajectories and the path the bullet takes whether or not that's true. And what we were able to prove was that the gun was leveled completely horizontally when it was fired. That means he was aiming it directly at her when it was fired. It was not being pulled from a lowered position. So he lied. And let me tell you something. In that, I don't know if you remember, in that murder, I describe her calling 911.
Oh, yeah.
There was a 911 call that we played to the jury. And I will never, ever, ever forget that call. She had been shot in the throat, in her voice box. And all she could manage to muster was, and it took a lot of effort and struggle, was the word hurt. And it was very hard to understand, but that's all she could get out with much, much effort. And she of course she didn't survive, but she died a slow, agonizing, horrible, painful death.
And there were no cameras? No.
It was a tiny little mom and pop store.
What year was this?
Oh, God, probably 95.
95. Mm-hmm. There's another one I wanted to bring up. I guess she was a teenager. Her name was, in the book, Guadalupe, or Lupita. And she was murdered by her boyfriend.
The huffer, the sprayhead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. True story.
Was this in Houston?
No, the book takes place in Houston, but it was San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
She was found under. I changed I changed a little bit of the facts because it was. I placed it in Houston rather than San Antonio. Yeah. She was found under the Brazos Bridge over off by Guadalupe, and everything else is the truth. She was dating a sprayhead who would sniff, that silver metallic paint all day long, and that stuff absolutely corrodes your brain. And he had some wild, crazy delusion in his head, and he just attacked her for no reason. And she was just a little 14-year-old girl. And he just stabbed her repeatedly over and over and over again and killed her. And again, I tried that case. That was one of the first murders that Juanita Vasquez Gardner and I tried together. And that was one of the first murders I tried also. And I learned a lot about separating your emotion from the task at hand. It was a heartbreaking case, but I had a job to do.
Yeah.
I had to get this guy sent to prison for life. There was just no alternative. What he did was so horrible. And we got the job done, but it was, it still resonates with me. I can tell you the facts like it happened yesterday, even though it was many years ago.
The stabbing was so violent that the handle of the knife broke off.
Yeah, that happens more often than you realize.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. I talk with my sister sometimes about this, about the death penalty. I've gone with her. I said, I don't know how to feel about that because it's weird because we live in a society where murder is not allowed, right? but one of the punishments that we give is a death penalty. She usually comes back at me with, well, the way we do it is more humane than the way that they do it. As a judge, did you ever have to give the death penalty?
No, I did not. But I did plenty of death penalties. Not plenty. I did a handful of death penalties as a prosecutor. And they were very difficult.
So you would just seek life?
No, I didn't. Don't confuse it being difficult with me having any reservation about seeking the death penalty against someone who I think deserved it.
Yeah.
But again, let me tell you, the first time I got the death penalty, I remember coming home. I used to drink then. I haven't drank in years, but I remember coming home. No, first I stopped at the bar across the street from the courthouse. Of course, there was a big celebration going on that we'd gotten the death penalty, and I remember not feeling in any way celebratory or feeling celebrating. I didn't appreciate backslaps or anything, and I remember leaving because I knew that I'd had a hand in this is Texas. If you get the death penalty, you're going to be executed.
Yeah, and
I had a hand that someone was going to be killed, and I remember going home and sitting in my garage it was Friday night when we got the verdict. Sitting up in my garage, just drinking and smoking cigarettes until the wee hours, just thinking about it with my conscience. I knew that this man deserved the death penalty. Yeah. I had no doubt what he had done was evil and that there is evil in this world. But what I was trying to reconcile was my hand in it. I didn't know if I wanted that. But I went on to do more death penalties. But you know something, I'll tell you. I had another case I handled where a guy was on a national crime spree. He was going state to state and he was not really violent crimes, but he was using stolen credit cards and stealing cars. Just a nuisance type of guy. And he was from Alabama, and he found his way to Texas after driving all over the country. Wow. And he was pulled over by a DPS trooper because he had tried to use a stolen credit card at a motel. And when the state trooper walked up to the window, the guy pulled out a handgun. He killed the officer right on the spot. Okay. And this guy was facing trial when he cut his ankle monitor and went on this crime spree all over the country, and then in cold blood killed this officer. So I handled the appeals on that case. I was a baby prosecutor. I handled the appeals and won them all until he'd run out of options, was going to be executed. And he had a mother who was living only to see her son's murderer executed. Her name was Miss Tier. I still remember her. She would call me because I became her friend. And when his appeals had run out, I had already been a prosecutor for years then. Mm-hmm. She called me and said, the execution is in a few days, and I want you to go with me to watch him. His name was Billy George Hughes. I want you to be with me when we watched Billy George Hughes put to death. And I told her, Miss Tier, I really care about you. And I did everything I could to have him executed, put to death. Mm-hmm. But ma'am, I can't do that. Oh. She got a little, not upset, sad. She said, why? I said, because it would affect my ability to seek the death penalty against other people and to do my job and to carry out my mandate if I witnessed this.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a cowardly way out. But I didn't accompany her, and I still have wondered to this day if I shouldn't have gone with her. He was put to death. He showed absolutely no remorse and said just something mean right before they executed him. Oh, he was no good. But I couldn't watch it.
And you've never been to any of those?
I never have, no interest.
Obviously, I mean, he committed crimes in other states. Was he on the hook for the stuff he did in the other states? Or?
Oh, he was wanted all over the place. Yeah. He was just a crazy guy.
Jeez. Take me down this intricate web of the Mexican Mafia, because the case that you tried had a lot of moving parts. I guess let's start off with RICO. Could you explain to me RICO and what that is? What are the charges?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll give you a little bit of a thumbnail of the origin, why they thought it was necessary to pass it. Okay. It was passed to target the Sicilian Mafia in New York, in the Northeast. And what it is they would commit various state crimes, stealing cars, shaking down shop owners, stealing things off the docks at the wharves, you know, and plundering union pensions, committing local murders. These are all local state crimes.
Okay.
For instance, if you steal a car, it is a state crime unless you drive it across state lines.
Oh, okay.
And murder is a state crime unless you cross state lines to commit it. Kidnapping is a state crime unless you move your victim across state lines, and so forth and so on.
Okay.
And this was really benefiting the mafia. The only people that could go after them were the locals, and they were not equipped to do a 3-year investigation of the families of the mafia.
Yeah.
The feds are. You know, I always said the federal government is the only entity that can write hot checks at will and has unlimited resources. They can do a 3-5 year investigation without a problem. So they decided, a professor came up with an idea for a statute that he called the RICO statute, and it said, what we will do is if you have a group that bands together, associates together, and they commit a series of crimes in a pattern, including state crimes, and they do that to benefit their association, that's a RICO violation. So what they did, and it's a federal offense. So what they did is they federalized state crimes and allowed you to bunch them all into one crime and present it all to the jury. So normally you have unrelated crimes in the sense that, you know, one involves drug dealing and one involves killing a rival. Mm-hmm. Those are unrelated unless they're for the same purpose of benefiting the Gambino family.
Okay.
That under the statute, they are related. And not only are you permitted to present it to the jury, you're required to. Okay. You see the power of this statute?
I do. One of the things that I was reading in your book is you're trying to find something to pin these guys on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, I'll get them on a conspiracy. And, your partner's like, well, conspiracy. Well, yeah, he thought about it. And he had a hand in it just by thinking it. So I guess what I'm getting at is, I guess the federal part has more range to get you on something.
Absolutely.
On something.
The federal, RICO, you're talking about RICO still?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The RICO statute is the big gun. It's the nuclear option. They aren't brought up real often, but when they are brought, I don't think one has ever been lost.
So we're talking about murders, drugs, everything.
Yes, but you can use it for corruption. Let's say there's I've seen it to where they target a small police department that shakes down all the people it pulls over.
Oh.
That's an association, a police department. Yeah. They're committing a series of crimes, which is corruption.
Yeah.
And it could be something as unsexy as that, or they're going against La Cosa Nostra, the mafia, for 30 murders. Or in the San Antonio case, where we have the Texas Mexican Mafia running wild, killing people at will, and all these murders piling up unsolved.
So this Mexican Mafia case was what, 33 gang members or 33 members?
Yes, members and associates. Some people were not full-blown members, but they were associated with it. But the vast majority were full-blown members.
And so you're going after these guys, and you're having to... What was the best way of infiltrating this organization when obviously, you're not on their side, right? You have to get in there. You have to get all the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you even start? Where do you even start to solve murders like that are old? And there's not just one. There's like numerous. and then ones you didn't even know about.
There's only one way to do it. Only one. There's no substitute for it. You have to infiltrate the gang. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean you have to get inside it. And by that I mean you have to convince a current or former mafia member to flip and become a prosecution witness. That takes skill and a lot of luck. But we did it.
Yeah, because they're obviously wanting deals. They don't want to do life.
They don't want, but you would be surprised at how strong their loyalty is to the gang. Many of them will take life in a heartbeat and won't consider betraying the gang. The vast majority. Very few will look at their own interests and say, I'm going to betray the gang. It's a rare thing. So when you have someone who does that, you have a priceless asset.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's break this down, this organization, because one of the things that was also I was thinking about is like, how could all these people be loyal to two guys, right? You have the president and vice president, the two guys, and they're locked up. It's like, how much control do you have from being locked up? And you got all these loyal guys on the street. I don't get it.
What is the essence of loyalty? It's blind faith in somebody or something. It's almost like religion. They have never met the president for life or vice president for life. Mm-hmm. But they know that they are head of an organization that they are deeply committed to.
Okay.
So their loyalty probably more accurately is to the gang that happens to be headed by these two people. Does that make you see the distinction?
One of them, what is it? The president is like locked up in like Colorado in that Supermax one.
Yeah, Supermax.
And the other is where's the other guy?
He's in Huntsville. He's in state prison.
Oh, okay.
The leader, the president for life, is the one who founded the gang. He's a guy by the name of Herb Huerta, who's doing multiple life sentences. He started the gang out of whole cloth. He'll never be free. And the vice president for life is a guy named Benito Alonso. I can't believe he's still alive. He must be 80 by now. But yeah, they helped start the organization, and they're nominal heads of it. They have to pretty much entrust all their authority to their proxies in the free world, or other people.
This and this gang was coming out of California. Are they both connected to California? Is that where it comes from?
No, they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. The California Mexican Mafia is smaller, much, much, much smaller. Okay. And they operate totally different, and they're limited pretty much to California. The Texas Mexican Mafia, when they started, first had to get permission from the California group to use a derivative of their name.
Yeah.
And they were given permission. Said, yeah, you guys can name your gang the Texas Mexican Mafia. They have nothing to do with each other. The Texas Mexican Mafia is much, much, much larger in membership. Yeah, because it operates differently.
Going back to the state thing real quick, I just thought of something. I remember hearing about stories about like in New York and New Jersey, when they would commit a murder, they would just drive over to New Jersey and dump it in the woods. Then it became a New Jersey homicide.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that be a federal crime?
It would be. Uh-huh.
Okay. Because I thought the way you were explaining it, I was like, oh, that's how they got around those state things. They throw it in the next state, and it becomes another state's problem.
Well, first of all, the feds are not experts at murders.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the FBI that would handle that. And they normally leave murders to the experts at murders, and those are the locals, the local police departments with homicide divisions who day in and out investigate murders. Mm-hmm. They're better suited to investigate murders. However, in extraordinary circumstances, and the case that I handled was one of them, where you had dozens of murders that were unsolved, and the locals were not able to handle that, where the Fed stepped in and said, we're going to do something about it. We're going to use RICO. I said, I'm going to use RICO.
What? Why were they not? Were they just not equipped and not enough manpower? Or?
No. The reason they were unsolved was because they were carried out by professional murderers and criminals who know how to commit a murder. You don't do it in front of a crowd. Yeah, you use a revolver instead of a semi-auto, so you don't leave shell casings at the scene.
Oh, that's right.
So and so on and so forth. And the Texas Mexican Mafia has a huge advantage in that nobody will testify against them. A barroom shooting, half the people will testify. Yeah, it was Joe Smith. He got mad. He lost the pool game. And he pulled out a gun and shot them. Not a problem. They're going to testify. If it was a Mexican Mafia murder in the pool hall, everyone was in the bathroom at the time and nobody saw anything.
Why is that? Is it because they don't want to get whacked out themselves?
They know they will get whacked.
I also was thinking, like, they went unsolved because the local authorities, they're bad guys killing bad guys. Who cares?
There was a strong element of that. Truth be told, in the book, one of the murders we sent off for, I don't remember which book. I think it was the Fiery Dusk. You can remind me.
Okay.
We asked the San Antonio Police Department, send over to that murder file to us. And when we got it, there was a big stick-em note on it that said, "This is Mexican Mafia. Good luck. Ha ha."
Oh, God.
Because they're impossible to solve, they thought.
Yeah.
You know? But I tell you what, we got in there and we solved 24 of them. I didn't, but my agents did.
You talked about crowded bar and whatnot. You have a case in there about the Grand Central Station nightclub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? True story.
I remember that place. I do remember it was pretty crazy. I didn't go there a lot, though. But when I was reading that, I was thinking, this could have easily been done and nobody have seen it because it's got multiple rooms, right? But the way that they did it, right? It's like attack them, make a big scuffle, and then we'll shoot them. Mm-hmm. And then nobody saw anything.
Nobody saw anything.
That's because people knew that those guys were...
No, I think that they genuinely... there's a lot of tumultuousness, people, it causes people to get real excited.
Yeah.
The delirium almost. And it's very common that their descriptions are so off because they're shooting, they're trying to get away. And these people know that, the killers. They know, don't take more than 2 seconds to get this guy killed and get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And they even left the gun behind. They didn't even bother taking it. The gun was found.
The gun was found?
Mm-hmm.
Were there any prints on it?
No.
No prints?
No. Listen, TV stuff.
Yeah.
In 35 years, I've had one murder with a fingerprint and one murder. One gun case with a fingerprint on it and one gun case with DNA on it. Everyone thinks you find DNA and fingerprints everywhere. It's actually much less common than you believe.
So things like touch DNA and all that stuff?
It's advancing so fast now that may be different, but for now, no, it's not that easy.
Well,
mm-hmm.
So you get in there and you start solving these murders,
mm-hmm.
right? You got this one guy, if I remember, they called him Negro.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying, I don't want to do life, but I want a deal. Mm-hmm. And he's giving you everything.
Yeah.
Is that really how it went down?
I'm trying to refresh my memory. Is it the guy that had the bodies on his dad's property?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I changed his name.
Yeah, so he's got a dumping site, right?
Yeah.
And he's bearing all these hits on this place. Nobody knows about it.
Right.
And that's how you're solving all these murders. They found a dumping ground.
He got on board. He was a stone cold sociopath. I am telling you. I sat in the room, like we're sitting this close.
Yeah.
I sat in the room with him many, many times, right? And interviewed him multiple times. I was friendly with the guy.
Yeah.
But I also knew that if it was to his advantage, he would cut my throat in a second, and anybody else's. He killed multiple people. He did this absolutely not out of the goodness of his heart. He did the mental calculations and thought it was in his best interest, and it was in his best interest. He was facing dying in prison for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, my information is so valuable. They're going to want it so bad. They're going to give me a hell of a deal.
Yeah.
He knew the system. He was right.
What? So if he's released or when he's released,
Mm-hmm.
would he be facing any type of like retribution or on the street? I'm imagining they know, right? He talked and...
You know something? I have to give the feds credit. The multiple in the books I described the biggest cases I brought against the mafia, but there were others also that were much smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
But we hit them so hard that we really decimated the gang. They're not in any real position to retaliate against anybody. They have been really neutered to a certain extent. They may one day come back, and maybe they have. I don't keep up with it anymore since I'm in private practice. But and on top of that, let's carry your question further. If they were still in their heyday and Negro was released and was walking the west side, they know if they touched a hair on his head, that's killing a federal witness.
Mm.
And they know the feds don't play. That's one thing that the carnales, the mafia members, and all the gang members realizes. They do not want federal prosecutions or federal indictments because they know they do hard time and the feds come at them full bore,
Yeah.
And they don't want that. They'd much rather do state time and state prosecution. They don't fear that at all. So, in large part, if you become a federal witness, you're kind of given immunity from retaliation.
Oh,
It's a very rare thing. I knew people who had testified in previous cases before me who were walking the streets and nobody touched them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So you're speaking with this guy, and was he handcuffed or was just sitting?
They were always handcuffed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because obviously he knew who you were because you've done this before.
Yeah. They all knew me.
Okay.
All of them. After I did so many cases, they all knew me.
Yeah.
Across the country, in all the federal penitentiaries, they knew who I was.
Yeah. So, were you ever worried about getting hurt, or, I'm sure you were threatened by these guys?
Yes, I was. Was I worried about it? Look, I'm not a badass guy who's fearless or, come on, I'm ready for you. That's not me, right?
Yeah.
I carried a gun at all times back then.
Oh, okay.
But I also knew, listen, I came to terms with it. I reconciled in my mind that if they were going to kill me, they were going to kill me. And there's nothing I could do. It could be in an HEB parking lot. It could be driving to work. It could be anywhere. It was going to happen. It was not hard to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And I came to terms with it, that there was nothing I could do to change that. And I was not afraid. I obviously didn't want it to happen, but I wasn't afraid. I got threatened. I had a security detail for 3 months where the marshals drove me and were at my house for 3 months, 24 hours a day.
Oh, they lived at your house.
Well, they didn't. They were on duty, so they weren't sleeping there. So, but they would park in front, and there would be one in the backyard, and they were all over the house. For 3 months, and I couldn't drive. They would drive me. Anyway, it was more of a nuisance than anything. But I wasn't really scared of it because it's kind of like fate. I mean, what are you going to do to change your fate,
Yeah.
It's like you and me, you know what? We're going to die. Does that scare you? No.
I think about it when I get older. As I get older, I think.
And I think when you get older, you accept it. And most old people aren't afraid of it. And I guess I just adopt that. Not because I'm a badass. Don't get me wrong. I knew there was nothing I could do to change what was going to happen.
You say these guys are professional killers or expert killers, right? Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about the police officer from, what was his name? Oh, yeah. Julian Pesina.
Oh, from Balcones Heights. Mm-hmm.
That murder seemed reckless. Like, one guy, okay, so so he was killed outside of his tattoo shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were collecting the dime.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something about that real quick. Is that like just 10% of whatever he's selling, or
maybe at one they call it the 10% or the dime, but that's not accurate. Maybe at one time it was 10%, but they simplified it. And as long as I've been prosecuting, it's $100 an ounce.
Oh, okay.
$100 an ounce of cocaine, $100 an ounce of heroin that you sell. You have to pay.
So this
Pesina.
guy, Pesina, he's a police officer, and he's just a fanboy. And he's not a member.
Correct. Right? He is absolutely not a member.
And he's going around with these guys. He's dropping names because he was a jailer, so he has all the names. Mm-hmm. And he convinces the Mexican Mafia that he's one of them.
Right.
Then they find out that he is a police officer.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then they decide to whack him out. Right. One of the things I was thinking is like, wouldn't that be a valuable asset? I mean, wouldn't you be getting information? Wouldn't you? But no. So they decided to kill him. But the way that they did that, to me, seemed reckless, right? It was like two guys, or actually three guys, right? The car, and then they just come out of nowhere and just shoot him. That seems reckless, right? There's too many people.
I think they didn't count on the video cameras everywhere have changed things.
Okay.
20 years ago, this would have been a typical hit. It's the middle of it's the middle of the night, or not real dark, but there's no one around. Mm-hmm. You just go in there, shoot them, you leave. There's no witnesses. It's a hard case to solve. It's a real hard case to solve.
But in this case, it was pretty easy, right?
In this case, Julian Pesina was about to be arrested.
Okay.
Because the feds, we were onto him. And not so much the mafia thing, but he was also selling drugs.
Okay.
If he'd been arrested on time, he'd still be alive. But let me tell you, I think you're real wondering, why did this guy do that? This is the most bizarre thing ever.
Yeah. I don't understand. Why are you still a police officer if you're...
Okay, I've never heard of anything like this. This guy was, to me, this is my pet theory, was obsessed with the Texas Mexican Mafia. I mean, he had mafia tattoos. Mm-hmm. He was just obsessed with them, and he enjoyed the criminal element. He loved it, but he also, but the biggest dichotomy, he was also a police officer. He probably was a shitty police officer, but not excuse my language, probably a really bad police officer, but. He was more inclined towards the criminal element, and he managed to convince he knew enough about the mafia and about criminals that he was able to pull this off. Mm-hmm. Number one, the mafia or nobody would suspect that anybody would be insane enough to impersonate one of them and to go in and say, I'm mafia, and they would have no real reason to doubt it, but they do check in anyway. They don't check whether you're really in the mafia. They check what your standing is. Are you in good standing or not? And that was bound to catch up with him because no one knew him. Mm-hmm. So the first thing they do is they say, who's your padrino? Who sponsored you?
Oh, okay.
And they'll write to him. They'll shoot what they call a huila, a note to that guy. He was probably in prison. Yeah. And they'll say, hey, tell us about Pesina. Give us the onda on him.
Yeah.
They would have found out. Well, they did find out.
Yeah.
He did a traffic stop and somebody recognized him, as I recall. Said, that guy's a police officer. No, he was in a meeting. He was meeting with some carnales, and one of them said, I remember that guy pulling me over. He's a cop.
And that's how they found out.
Yeah. And listen, you were talking about how sloppy and this and that the murder was, and you're a little shocked by it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, there are certain affronts to the Texas Mexican Mafia that cannot go unaddressed.
Okay.
Let me give you a couple examples. One of them is wearing a tattoo that identifies you as Texas Mexican Mafia when you are not.
Okay.
If you do that, and that has happened, so that people can get along in prison and this and that, you are a dead man. You will be killed for them. Okay?
Wow.
Another thing is stealing from the Mafia. Their money, whether it's a shakedown behind bars or going and pretending to be a Mafia member and collecting the dime from drug dealers, you will be killed for that. And one of them, the third one is claiming you're Mafia. Not so much a tattoo, but just claiming that you're Mafia when you're not.
Yeah.
That'll get you killed. That cannot be tolerated. You will be killed.
Jeez. Yeah, because that's how that guy was that got killed in the nightclub, right? Wasn't he also like a fanboy? And he was claiming he was a Texas syndicate member?
Yeah.
And he really wasn't?
He was not.
Okay. And that, for them, like, I don't know much about them, but it was the same rules?
Yeah. They were like, have at him. He's not us. You do whatever you want to with him.
Jeez. Yeah, so, and they're involved in everything. They're involved in drugs. They're involved in murders. Murder for hire?
No.
Mm-mm.
And they claim they're willing to, but I've never seen cases of it.
Okay.
Well, I just haven't seen it.
In this case, you're interviewing him, right? The guy we're speaking about, Negro. And you have to solve all these murders, but you have to figure out, is he telling the truth? Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining you have to interview lots of people because you don't have any evidence, right? Mm-hmm. How do you build a case without anything solid? And then you got to convince a jury to believe this guy.
Legally, the law says that his word alone is enough to find somebody guilty of murder. By my personal standard, Joey's code, that is not enough.
Okay.
And what I instructed my agents who were doing this case is, when anybody tells us, Joe Sanchez committed a murder, we want 2 independent sources confirming that. Okay. It could be somebody else saying, that's true, Joe did it. Or it could be a fact that they recite about the case forensically that confirms it. If they say he did it and he used a .45 caliber hollow point, we go back and pull the autopsy and find a slug of a .45 caliber hollow point, then we will have 2 sources confirming what he said. And at the very minimum, I required that before anybody was charged with the murder.
Yeah. Yeah, because I would think that a confession is not enough, right? How do you know? If I sat here and told you, I committed this murder, but I could be lying,
You could be, but, one thing, and it's very hard to present in the book, or even to tell you.
Okay.
But when you have a guy who walks into a federal courtroom or any courtroom and says, I am a criminal, I have been a criminal since I was 12 years old. I have robbed, I have shot people, I have been to the penitentiary 5 times. I know all the defendants on trial. That's Bethel. I did time with him. That's Juan. He and I go back and forth. We did a murder together, blah, blah, blah. This is engrossing stuff. Mm-hmm. This is stuff that is undeniable. Okay. You can look at him and say, that guy testifying with the devil demon eyes, every word he's saying is the truth. because nobody would have come into this courtroom and talk about this way and make it all up. And we would follow up always with his descriptions of the murders he participated on, with the autopsies, the crime scene that confirmed it did go down the way he said it did.
Yeah. Yeah, because a jury, if they see an interrogation video, that's just enough for them sometimes, isn't it?
It is.
Like he said he did it. He did it.
It is, but, we went a little beyond that. I'll give you one more example, okay? Mm-hmm. There was a guy named Bugsy who we flipped. And Bugsy said, committed a murder, but Bugsy knew about other murders too, and he was willing to cooperate. And Bugsy talked about this one murder he committed, and it's in one of the books. I can't remember which one. And he says, this guy was killed because he was going around robbing stores. In other words, drug dealers who were paying the tax as part of get a benefit from the mafia for paying the taxes. You're protected from robbery. If someone robs you, they're going to go and find that guy and get your money back and beat the hell out of that guy. Put him in the hospital if they don't kill him. That's just one of the benefits you get. And this one guy was going around shaking down what they call fixed dealers who are paying the tax. And he was talking bad about the mafia because he was an ex-mafia member who had been kicked out. Mm-hmm. And they put the green light on him. That means he was a dead man walking. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And he shows up at Bugsy. Bugsy, of course, sells heroin for a living. He shows up. This guy was just so brazen. Mm-hmm. He shows up at Bugsy's house and scores some heroin. And Bugsy sells him the heroin and says, you go to Fix next door. I own the little casita next door. You can go in there and shoot up in there. It's a little shack.
Oh, okay.
And then Bugsy gets on the horn to his captain and says, hey, so-and-so just come and scored some heroin from me. And just plain as day. And they're like, where is he? They said, and Bugsy said, he's next door shooting up, fixing. They said, well, go smoke him.
Yeah. So
Bugsy told us, and I'm telling you, he sat right across and told me the story. He said, I went and got a 45. I went next door. When I opened the door, his back was to me, and he was kneeling, I remember, and he had his arm tied off for heroin, to shoot up heroin, and he was injecting. So he was oblivious to everything because he was in an opiate heaven, right? Mm-hmm. And Bugsy just went up right behind him and shot him in the brainstem in the back of the head, right? And that case was unsolved. Bugsy then got him with some other mafia members. They rolled him up in the carpet because it was bloody, threw it in the trunk of the dead guy's car, and just left the car at the HEB, and they found him a few days later decomposing. Went unsolved. It was just some heroin addict who was found in the trunk of a car, rolled up in a carpet, and where do you begin to solve that case, right? Yeah. Well, Bugsy solved it for us, but we had to make sure that because not only was Bugsy guilty, but the person who told him go in there and shoot him was just as guilty, right? So he was facing the same penalty Bugsy was. So we had to make sure before we charged that other guy that Bugsy was telling the truth. So we had to confirm it, corroborate it. It's what they say legally. Yeah. So we went back to the crime scene a couple of years later. I didn't. They sent the agents back. Sure enough, where they said the guy was kneeling, there was a mark, an indentation on the floor that looked like a bullet had ricocheted off the wood floor. Okay. And they followed the path, and they saw that it had bounced. It had gone through the dead guy's head, hit the floor, ricocheted up, and they saw where it entered the ceiling. Okay. So they got in the attic, and they cut that beam out, and guess what? They found the bullet. And guess what caliber it was? A 45, just like he said. It all just made sense,
Wow, after all that time.
It was still there.
Yeah, that is crazy. What's crazy, what you just said is that the guy gave him the green light to, well, go shoot him. Mm-hmm. And you have to also charge that guy. That's that federal part you were talking about, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what is that, conspiracy?
That's right. That was part of racketeering. So he's charged with. They were all charged with racketeering.
Do you remember that case? It was like a nationwide, a couple of years ago. It was a young girl was convincing her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was suicidal, and she convinced him to kill himself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he did. It was a huge controversy because they brought her in. It's like, you're responsible for this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the federal thing again, or is that a state?
No, that's strictly a state crime.
Strictly a state crime. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just by telling them to do something, you're guilty.
It depends on each state's laws, of course, but just in a general sense, if you take an action that you know will result in someone's death, and you're reckless about it, that's usually called manslaughter.
Oh, okay.
And what she did was very reckless because she knew he was suicidal.
Yeah.
She might as well have pulled the trigger herself. I agreed with that prosecution. I know a lot of people had a lot of difficulty with it, but I agreed with it. I'm not saying she should have gotten life, but she should have been held accountable.
Huh. That is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these other guys in this big mafia case, you're solving these murders. Were you more focused on those guys who pulled the trigger, or the guys who were given the green light? Because I'm imagining those guys that were given the green light are the higher ones, right? Lieutenants and...
Los encargados, they're called, those in charge.
Okay.
I made no distinction. To me, there's a practical difference. I mean, it takes probably more nerve and guts to squeeze the trigger and watch somebody's brains fly out than it does given the order. But legally, they're both equally guilty, and I made no distinction. Yeah. I went after both of them just as hard, and I sought the same sentence.
I was talking with my friend about this because I was saying, well, we were talking about the book, about how you went after these guys so hard. You really made a difference with like how it is on the street. His argument was like, well, we've done that before. We've gotten the head of the snake before. But it doesn't really do much. Like, we got El Chapo, but the show still goes on. But in this case, it seems different, right? Because these guys don't want to do hard time. They don't want to have to pay the consequences of this.
Let me say one thing. Your friend makes a very good point.
Okay.
But it doesn't apply here. And let me tell you the difference. Let me use an example.
Sure.
You heard of the Bandidos?
Yeah, it's a motorcycle gang, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. They controlled the Southwest United States. Hell's Angels were not permitted in Texas. They would be killed if they ever ventured into Texas. Any other gangs from Michigan or wherever, if they were going to cross through Texas, had to get permission before. If you were a motorcycle club, you could not wear certain regalia on your vest. In other words, the Bandidos ran Texas when it came to motorcycling, right?
Yeah.
And they also did a lot of illegal conduct, right? And they had a president, and they had officers, a sergeant of arms and vice president and all this stuff. And they had chapters all over the world. They were very well organized. And they were I would say they're a motorcycle. They call themselves a club, but they were a motorcycle gang, and they were smarter than the typical gang. They weren't all a bunch of whacked out heroin addicts like the Texas Mexican Mafia. Most of them had jobs, and but they also were 1%ers. That means they lived outside the law and were proud of it, right? So, what I'm getting at is when I at my last year or two at the U.S. as a federal prosecutor before I became a judge, I had a supervisory role then. But one of these very ambitious prosecutors targeted the Bandidos, and he was a hardworking, brilliant prosecutor, and he kind of took my approach. I guided him on the way I did the Mexican Mafia, comprehensive. Take your time.
Yeah.
Look, don't stop looking, and take your time and develop your witnesses, flip people. He did it. He used the same MO that I did. And he ended up with a trove of evidence. against the Banditos. The Banditos have been prosecuted time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
And like your friend says, yeah, then you get the head snake, no big deal, whatever. Well, the head of the snake had never really been gotten. They would knock off members because the head of the snake was too smart. Never touched drugs, never did this and that. He lived in Houston. The same for the vice president, like that. They're more sophisticated than your typical gang. But this federal prosecutor indicted them all for racketeering.
Okay.
The president, vice president, all of them. He took them to trial, and he won. The president wouldn't accept a very generous offer. He was so confident and smiled through the trial. He thought they would never convict him because he had insulated himself so well.
Yeah.
But the case was prepared so well that he was found guilty. And let me tell you something. My point that I'm getting to is that Banditos are not what they used to be. The head of the snake was cut off and it withered. Now, if you drive down the highways, you see all kinds of motorcycle clubs who wear what was once prohibited. All these rules and demands that the Banditos used to enforce, they've all fallen by the wayside. They're no longer a force anymore. So your friend is right about maybe the Mexican cartels that are embedded into the government and every fabric of Mexican society.
Yeah.
But when you target a gang in a laser-focused way here in the United States, you can neuter them effectively. And he did.
Wow. Yeah, because they couldn't come through Texas because obviously they would be selling drugs or what was the deal?
Let's say they were taking a trip to Florida, maybe for vacation or whatever.
Yeah.
They would have to, as they were mandated to announce their presence of crossing through and get permission.
Huh. Yeah, that is so crazy. It's so crazy how, to me they don't seem as sophisticated, but the way you're telling me, it's pretty wild. Wild.
They look rough
hierarchy.
And burly and this and that, but they were a pretty smart bunch.
Yeah.
And they were very violent, under the radar type of gang. Listen, there was a guy in Austin. One of the cases that he brought that was part of the bigger case, part of his investigation, was this guy in Austin who decided he was going to wear a Hell's Angel cut, a vest. They call it a cut.
Okay.
You absolutely cannot do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely cannot do that.
Yeah.
They had the decency, let's say, to warn him, you absolutely do not wear that, and you're not supposed to be here in Texas. So stop wearing the cut. Get the hell out of Texas.
Yeah.
The guy didn't listen. So he's walking out of a pizza parlor with his family when his head explodes in front of his family with a sniper rifle shot. The Banditos took him out. And that was one of the acts they alleged in taking down the Banditos.
See, that seems a little bit more professional, right?
Intelligent.
Yeah. It's not up close in person. It's not reckless. No eyewitnesses.
Far enough away, nobody will see you. You get out of town. You get on 35. You're out of town before the smoke clears.
Yeah. But in this case, they knew, right? Everyone knew who.
The person who participated flipped. That's how these cases are always solved. He agreed to testify and told the whole story.
When they flip, what is the best deal that you give them? And say, look, you are ready on looking at life, right?
It really depends on the person, their criminal history, and what they did. If someone killed 3 people, he's probably going to get. He's got to do about 30 years.
Yeah.
And there's no parole in the federal system, so.
Oh, okay.
No parole. But if someone didn't kill and he's just testifying about drugs, you get a sentence in the teens.
Yeah.
Something like that. It depends.
I was going to ask you. So federal, no parole. So it's all the time. If you get 10 years, you're doing 10 years.
They knock off some if you behave yourself.
Okay.
But it's not a whole lot. It's not parole. It's just they'll give you a little credit for behaving yourself. As an incentive to behave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll serve a little less than 10 years. Assuming you behave. If you go in there and act a fool, you're going to serve 10 years.
I would imagine that it would be hard to walk a straight line in prison when you have to survive. You know?
Listen, that's a whole different world.
Yeah.
It's a world made up of psychopaths, predators, con men, and people who are probably clinically insane.
Yeah.
And so forth. So it's a very dangerous world. And you're right. You do have to walk a line. You have to be able to do what I call do time.
Mm.
You have to know how to do time. If you don't, they're going to eat you up. A professional criminal can smell weakness from a mile away, brother.
Yeah.
And if you're weak, you will not make it. You will make it, but you will not emerge intact.
Yeah.
You will lose a lot.
So it's not a place you're going to want to go.
Nope.
Yeah.
No.
You talked about con men right now. There's a video of you on YouTube presiding over this case of a woman. I guess it's here in San Antonio. I guess she conned a bunch of fashion designers and then tried to blame it on her daughter.
Was this like the cancer thing?
Was it a cancer?
She was trying to raise money, though, right?
Yeah, and she scammed all the
I remember
vendors.
That, yes.
Yeah. What caught me on that? I was like, she's trying to blame it on her daughter. And then the worst thing, to get up there, right? Because that's not something that you would normally do. Is you take the stand and try to explain yourself. It was just that little clip. I was like, oh, this is a train wreck. You're trying to explain yourself to the jury. Yeah.
It was not good. She got I remember I gave her a lengthy sentence.
So you said, I don't know if it was when I was talking to you on the phone, as a judge, you know less about the case than the jury does, right? So as a prosecutor, you know more about the case.
Prosecutor knows everything about the case.
Okay.
He's worked it up for trial. The judge knows nothing about it. He doesn't see reports or anything beforehand.
Yeah.
He will be listening. He will be learning as the jury learns.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's crazy. So, do you remember what you gave her in that? Obviously, she has to pay restitution.
I think I gave her like 15 years because she'd done it before.
Oh, okay.
She'd done it before, and she was scamming people, I think, for cancer, to help cancer survivors. To me, that you're going to get hammered if I'm the judge and you pull something like that. And then what stands out in your mind stood out in my mind too. She was so unrepentant. She was willing to blame her own daughter.
Yeah.
And not take any responsibility. That's somebody who's never going to change. The only thing they understand is punishment.
Yeah.
You can't rehabilitate them. Punishment.
Yeah, I think, and also at the end of a case, right? It seems more humiliating to be told by the judge, like, you're a bad person. You did this to people, and then you try to blame it on your daughter.
Yeah.
That's horrible. Like, I would feel horrible.
Most people would if they had a conscience.
Yeah. Just being told, and then you got to stand up in front. Jeez. The differences between the Texas Syndicate and the Mexican Mafia is that you said there are more of them, more of the Mafia, Mexican Mafia, because they don't have a...
In San Antonio.
Okay.
The state is divided up into regions. San Antonio is the Mexican Mafia, what they call their capital.
Yeah.
This is their stronghold. If you go to Houston, that's Texas Syndicate country.
Okay.
Texas Syndicate runs Houston. The gang world, anyway.
Yeah.
Go to El Paso, That's Barrio Azteca. They run it.
Oh,
and so forth.
Okay.
It's divided up into territories. And San Antonio is Mexican Mafia, strictly Mexican Mafia.
Did you see a lot of violent cases in Houston or in San Antonio? Was there, because one of the things I remember was after Hurricane Katrina, there was an increase in like the violence and crime. Mm-hmm. Would you say it was more violent there or here?
In Houston or San Antonio?
Yeah.
Well, I'm from Houston, but I've never prosecuted there. The books I did, but I never have. I would say just knowing Houston, having grown up there, Houston is much more violent. Mm-hmm. It has a different mentality. It's more of a frontier town.
Yeah.
And people are much quicker to pull out a gun and shoot in Houston.
Jeez. Mm. Yeah. You know, one of the things also is, and I do see like people, like I go to the grocery store, I see like people carrying guns now.
Yeah.
And when you have to use that, you know, I would imagine you would have to think about that. I mean, I would, because I would be like, because then I have to explain this, right? Mm-hmm. You'd have to explain if that person dies. Now I'm on the hook for this. Mm-hmm. How do you prove self-defense? How do you know? That's a huge thing. If I shoot them in the leg, that's still like a charge. That's still like a what do you say, like a murder charge?
Well, assuming they live, that's aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
Oh, okay.
It's still a serious offense.
Yeah. Yeah, something you really have to think about.
Well, you know, when there's an issue of self-defense, you know, if you're forced to defend yourself or your family or a neighbor, we really count on conscientious prosecutors and police officers at the front end, recognizing that this is a legitimate defense that was used properly.
Right.
And we do pretty good. The prosecutors and the police do a pretty decent job of that.
Yeah.
It's moved away from that, I'll be honest with you. I don't mean to disparage the DA's office now, but I think one of the biggest weaknesses in the DA's office is if anybody says I'm a victim and I was harmed, their word carries the day.
Yeah.
When I was a prosecutor in San Antonio, just because you said you're a victim and you want charges pressed, I was going to look at the facts. And there were many, 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 many times I said, no, you were not a victim. And this case is not going to be charged. That happens much less often nowadays.
One of the other things I was going to ask you about is when we talked on the phone, you kind of you told me something I didn't know. I was like, wow, I didn't know about money. The saying, money goes north, or no, money goes south, drugs go north. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to another guy who's a DEA guy, and he was telling me also there's also another saying on the highway. I guess troopers will say this: money goes fast, drugs go slow, meaning that drugs being transported on the highway, they're going to be driving, doing the speed limit, but if they have money, they're going to go real fast down to get it back to Mexico. Why would you do that? Because you also, when I was talking to you on the phone, you were like, well, you're going to have to prove this money is not from drug proceeds. Mm-hmm. And now we got the money, and now you're dead. Mm-hmm. Most likely you're going to be.
Maybe. Okay, first of all, a couple of distinctions between drugs and money. Mm-hmm. Having 5 kilos of heroin in your trunk is going to make, unless you have ice water in your veins, it's going to make you nervous.
Yeah.
Real scared. Having $250,000 in your trunk, yeah, it'll make you nervous, but not nearly like what 5 kilos of heroin will do.
Yeah.
Number one, it's just human nature, right? One is just, you look at it, there's no explanation you can give. The money, at least you can come up with. And they could very well just take the money and let you go. They'll give you a receipt. And if you present the receipt to where it was your destination, They know that money gets seized.
Oh, okay.
And you should be in good standing.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was also reading up on this stuff, I also noticed that. I was like, it seems a lot of people get, or at least in the Latin gangs and the cartels, they get murdered for money.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But it seems like in the Italian mob, they don't whack you out so fast. They might beat you up because they still want their money, and they want you to get it. And get it somehow.
Yeah.
It would seem that would be the smartest thing to do than kill off the person that's supposed to pay you back.
One is much more inclined to pull the trigger than the other. Absolutely. You're right.
It's just the nature of...
it's the nature of the organizations. When you talk about the Italian mob, these are businessmen largely who want to appear legitimate. I mean, look at Don Gotti. John Gotti, the Don, wore custom suits every day. He wasn't a heroin addict. Mm-hmm. Compare that to the Texas Mexican Mafia. Mm-hmm. Your guys are typically heroin users, and it's a whole different class of criminal who's going to pull the trigger a lot quicker.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like they know their laws, right?
Oh yeah,
they know how to get around things.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very, very sophisticated.
You talk about this character in the book. It was kind of sad. Scooby. And he was a drug user, and he was living in his truck, and then he gets killed by his own guys because they think he's an informant. Mm-hmm. Is that a real case? Is a guy,
and his real name was Scooby. I felt so that case touched me so much that I used his real name instead of changing it. His name was really Scooby. He lived in an old abandoned truck on Trinity Street on the shallow west side, and he was suspected of being a snitch because he was not charged in a traffic stop where drugs were seized, and the driver was charged, just like the book. And the fact that he was not charged to these whacked out drug addicts meant for sure he was a snitch, or else he would have been arrested. And so they decided to kill him. And I always thought, I tried to present Scooby's story in the book in a way that was very relatable in a human sense. I tried to humanize him, and I think I succeeded.
Yeah.
But it was very sad that a guy who did nothing but show blind allegiance to the Texas Mexican Mafia, who he thought were his brothers, was killed by those he thought were his brothers for a sin he never committed.
Yeah. Yeah, that one was kind of sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they would think that and just kill him over that. Mm-hmm. But he was still... But also he was still... The thing is that why are they entrusted in dealing dope and they're dope addicts themselves? Like, that is such a crazy thing.
It's culture, trying to think if I should tell you this or not.
Okay.
I'll just tell you this. What the hell I'll tell you. We way back when Benito Alonso, the guy who's in the vice president for life, he's in the state prison, Huntsville, I think. And he's real old. I mean, he must be 80. I don't know how the hell he's still alive. He's been locked up since the 70s.
Wow.
He was involved. You're way too young. You don't remember when Joe Carrasco tried to escape from prison in the 70s. It was the biggest thing ever. There was a shootout at TDC, and the most brazen prison escape attempt ever. Well, somebody smuggled guns into the prison, and it was Benito Alonso,
the vice president.
Yes, and ever since then because some ladies who worked, librarians who worked in there, were taken hostage, and they were killed during the shootout that ensued. It was horrible. It was a horrible case. Anyway, Benito Alonso's been in there forever. So anyway, we intercepted a recording we had a recording of him talking to some members, and he talked about how he still uses heroin, but he makes sure to use just enough to get high, but not get addicted. So what my point is, it's so embedded, drug use, that it's not really frowned upon unless it really affects your ability to do your job and you're screwing up real bad. So no, it's accepted. It's like me and you having a cold beer after work.
Yeah. Yeah, that is weird, because you would think like, you're making money and these guys are not the most reliable guys. Like if you're all doped up. Yeah.
You know what? But they've arrived at a brilliant plan. A brilliant scheme. And that is, if we make ourselves so intimidating and scary, and if we don't threaten violence unless we're going to use it. Yeah. We make no hollow threats. If people know either you do what we tell you to do or you will, with 100% certainty, face the consequences, they will bow down to us. They will share their drug proceeds with us. They will not call the police. And when you think about it, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant scheme. Nobody ever saw anything, and they collect the money, and they're in business, and they have a free dope supply.
That is crazy. That's like so manipulative. Where were their drugs coming from? Because
Mexico.
Okay, so right there. If it's coming from Mexico, I would imagine they would be in business with the cartels, or they would have to pay something to the cartels.
See, you keep bringing up questions that have so much more depth than you realize.
Yeah.
The cartels do not like doing business with the Texas Mexican Mafia. No one does, because they're thugs, and they will hijack you, and they will short you, and they're threatening.
Yeah.
Okay, they're very violent. Cartels don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they want to make money.
Right.
You know, they don't want to be messing around with a bunch of whacked out heroin addicts who may try to short you on something.
Yeah.
So they won't deal with them. And they don't even, as a matter of fact, they don't even allow Mexican Mafia members in Mexico. They're not allowed. If they catch you down there, you're in trouble. Okay? Standing rule. So that's part of the problem. They do move a lot of dope, but the problem was always scoring it. Because they couldn't get what's called a connect, which means a direct line to the cartels, because the cartels would not supply them. When I was doing my investigation, what they did was there was an established network of massive heroin dealers, and they muscled their way in and said, "You will share your supply with us, or else." And they made them an offer they couldn't refuse.
So the Mexican Mafia guys were telling cartel guys this?
No, the cartel had an arrangement with a network in San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
And they, rather than approaching the cartel, which would have gone nowhere, the cartel's not going to be afraid of the mafia.
Yeah.
They'll throw you in a vat of acid. They don't care. You know what I mean? They went to the San Antonio recipient of cartel dope and said, "You will share your supply with us. This is not a request. We expect you to do it." And they did. Yeah. So I shut that down. I don't know where they get their dope now. Normally they make most of their money shaking down drug dealers. They don't move a whole lot of massive amounts of big heroin distribution. They control it by taxing it. But when I was investigating them, they managed to establish a great connect because they coerced and under duress, made that supplier who was moving a lot of heroin share their supply.
All this information about how the business side works, was that from somebody who flipped also?
Yeah, all of that was from one of the people from the heroin dealers who was head of the heroin organization. It was a woman.
Wow.
It was a woman. We raided her house because we knew what she was doing. She'd been moving heroin since her and her family since the 60s. And they were long-time West Side heroin dealers, but just were very sophisticated about it. So we popped her and got her finally. And she was looking at a ton of time, and she says, "I'll testify." She did.
What did she get as far as?
I don't remember. It was less than 20 years, though. It was probably in the teens. She never hurt anybody, but she moved a lot of heroin.
What are the most unusual ways that you've seen drugs being brought in here? Like, what's...
I think the hollow shoes.
Hollow shoes.
Yeah, I thought that was ingenious.
Yeah.
That was in the book, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
They had these wedge shoes. You know what wedge shoes are?
I don't think...
They have big soles.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The heel is real big. But it's not just a big heel. It goes all the way to the tip of the shoe.
Oh, okay.
They're real high. They're platform shoes. Let's call them platform shoes. Or wedge shoes. They were custom made, hollowed out. You could fit half a key inside each shoe. So that means one... And they were women's shoes. So it was only women. It wouldn't arouse suspicion.
Huh.
And I'm going to stop some old middle-aged Mexican lady with 2 shopping bags coming from Mexico. She's not illegal. So let's say she's an American citizen, has a crossing card.
Yeah.
With 2 shopping bags. Nobody's going to stop her and ask her a single question. Mm-hmm. And she happens to be wearing these shoes, half a key in each one. Every time she crosses the border, she has brought 1 kilo of heroin over. She makes 3 trips, and she has 5 partners. They can bring in multiple kilos without arousing suspicion in one day.
Wow.
And if they do it every day, you got yourself a pipeline of heroin.
How did they discover that?
Snitches.
Wow.
Somebody we would figure out. I think the woman who flipped for us told us. And told us what to look for, and we looked, and we stopped one of the ladies with the heroin, and then of course they talked, and then one thing leads to the other.
So you got to see these shoes?
Introduce them in evidence at trial. Yes, I did.
Wow.
The jury was fascinated.
So the bottom of the sole came off, and it was hollowed out, and that's where it was.
Yeah,
packaged up.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I see these videos where they find them in like watermelons. Like they cut the watermelons. Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. They can do that. There's some with NAFTA. There's so much stuff crossing the border. You just can't even begin to put a. You can't. If you started searching every truck, you would shut the border down and cause a catastrophe for our country and Mexico.
Yeah,
you can't do that. Mexico's our biggest trading partner. We cannot impede that.
So you think it's a battle that we probably won't ever really win?
Not if Americans keep using drugs like they do. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the bottom line, is we use too many drugs in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, and now the biggest thing is the fentanyl, right? Because now you have this little pill, and you could bring thousands of them in like small things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fentanyl is a big, big problem. Number one, because the Chinese make it. Well, now the Mexicans make it now. In laboratories that are professional quality laboratories like we have in the United States. They make perfect. I mean, they operate openly in Mexico. Let's be honest about it. And in China, too. So they're making top quality fentanyl. And when they do that, it's so cheap. It's dirt cheap to manufacture. And then it gets over here, and the price, you can make so much money. Yeah. It's always the money that drives people.
As a judge, were there any cases that you would preside over that were drug related?
A ton, every day.
Oh, okay. Was there one that always, because I've read this about like some judges that they bring a fentanyl case and like, oh, you're getting the book thrown at you. Was there a certain drug with you that this is heroin? Yeah, you're getting.
I think methamphetamine is the worst drug.
Methamphetamine is like, what is that? Meth?
Meth.
Crystal meth?
Ice, they call it.
Oh, okay.
Extreme purity.
Yeah, because that really, it leaves holes in your brain or something, right?
It does. It ravages the body. It keeps you high for days at a time. It's gotten so cheap Mm-hmm. See, meth used to be expensive before it was imported from Mexico. Remember, they used to have something called cooking meth?
Yeah.
Probably in your lifetime. People would manufacture here in the United States in these meth labs. Mm-hmm. And it's a dangerous, toxic environment. People do it in hotel rooms. It's dangerous. You can blow yourself up. You can poison yourself. And the quality, depending on the quality can vary. Just like, did you see Breaking Bad?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of it, yeah.
Okay. He was an expert at making it. He made a high quality that was recognized. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes your best intentions go wrong. And Congress decided, the lawmakers decided, we had to put a stop to this meth being manufactured here. So we're going to regulate the main ingredient used, pseudoephedrine. You need to present an ID to buy it.
Yeah.
So what happened? Everyone stopped making it because it was too hard. They were going in to go and buy it, and the police would call. They did stop. Right. So guess who took up the slack?
Who?
Mexico. And guess what? When a good cook can make methamphetamine in the United States, it was 20% pure, excellent meth. All the meth that comes from Mexico, first of all, nobody cooks in the United States anymore because it all comes from Mexico. Guess what the purity is?
100%?
100%. 99 to 100%. It's lab quality, and it is a fraction of the cost. So regulating pseudoephedrine backfired, and now we are flooded with methamphetamine. And it's a horrible drug. It's very addicting.
Yeah.
It makes you psychotic. Your teeth fall out. It's real hard to get off of it. Rehabilitation's next to impossible to get off of it. And it makes you psycho.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
That's a big problem. So that's my least violence drug that I hated the most.
Jeez. Was there any other cases, I guess, presiding over as a judge that really stuck with you? That you're like...
Yeah, the most painful case I ever dealt with was this mom had a daughter, and she hooked up with a guy. She was a young girl, and the man she hooked up with adopted the little girl, and they raised the little girl, and they raised her to be a sex toy. That was... They introduced her to sex at a very young age. I'm talking prepubescent. And this was her biological mother. I couldn't get past that. This was her mother who participated in the acts. Didn't just allow stepdad to do it. Was participating with her daughter.
Yeah.
And totally... What they did to this girl was unimaginable. It went on for years, and I that case landed in my court. I'll never forget it. I just can't. I've got kids, and I don't understand how you could look at your children that way. I don't get it. Yeah. Don't get it at all.
You write about this story in there about how you prosecuted this case about this guy who killed. What was it? His girlfriend's uncle, and he was abusing her. And you're like, I'm not gonna send this guy to jail for murder because I side with him. Sudden passion, right?
It's absolute true story.
Oh, okay.
I remember that case very clearly.
Sudden passion. So now you have to convince the jury that, look, this guy is not a bad guy. What he did was bad, but how do you even...
Look, I was prosecuting the guy who killed his daughter's child molester. The guy who molested his little girl horribly. Father found out about it and killed the hell out of him.
Yeah.
Okay? There's some part of us, as guys say, yeah. He deserved it.
Right.
And the worst part of it is this guy who was killed had molested countless girls. Every female in the family, he had molested them as little girls. The little girls were not allowed to be near him.
Yeah.
He'd gotten away with it. He was an animal. And Dad found out about it and killed him.
Yeah.
It was my responsibility that's murder.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to kill someone just because they molest your daughter. That's still murder.
Yeah.
The jury may give you a lesser sentence. It may be, like you said, sudden passion. It probably was. But it's still murder. But I did not feel good prosecuting it. I thought, there's the law and the technical aspects of it and its intent. And there's what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't square with each other. Should he have killed that guy? No.
Yeah.
Would I have? Probably.
And he just didn't kill him. He just didn't shoot him. He did things to him. Yeah.
He beat him. He stabbed him. He strangled him. And shot him. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Because if that was just a regular murder, you're going to jail for life.
But I and I put that in the book because it was a case that was a real moral dilemma for me.
Right.
Not that I didn't think he did wrong. It's just that I didn't think he deserved to be punished.
Yeah.
You know? So anyway, what happened in the book is what really happened.
Yeah. Yeah. The sudden passion one, I had just learned about that. There was this case here in San Antonio. I don't know if you remember it, but the wife of this rich guy, she ran his mistress off the road and killed the husband on a motorcycle on accident.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And she got sudden passion, but she still did time. I think she did 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sudden passion. That is a crazy one. That is a unique one. Have you done a lot of those?
No. Mm-mm. Not really.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rare thing. It just doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. Yeah, because you would have to, and it'd be a unique situation, much like insanity, right? Insanity,
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
If you're going to claim insanity, it's probably not going to make it to trial if they could prove it before trial.
You know, the reason you don't hear much about insanity cases, trials involving someone raising insanity, is typically everyone agrees the person's crazy as hell.
Okay.
The prosecution and the defense.
Yeah.
It's someone who's just crazy, insane.
Yeah.
And an insane person, you can't hold them to account when they don't know what they're doing. It's like holding an infant, sending them to prison because they pulled the trigger on a gun. You know, you can't do that.
Yeah.
There's no criminal intent. They're psychotic.
And then they have a chance to be free.
They do have a chance once they show that they're no longer a danger. Mm-hmm. They could very well spend the rest of their life locked up if they're that bad off.
Man, there's a lot to take in. Joey, I know we're going about 2 hours here. We have to do this again. When's the new book come out?
I will get you a copy.
Okay.
Because I want you to read it, and I want to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
You'll love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick those other ones up also on Amazon. From Darkness Light. The other one is Sunday Morning Coming Down, and the newest one, A Fiery Dusk.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, get them from Amazon. They're a trilogy, so they follow each other. But the good thing is, like you read the third one first.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you weren't any worse for having picked up the third one. You still enjoyed the hell of it, right? Yeah. So you can do. I recommend you'll enjoy them even more if you read the first one, then the second one, then the third one.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one I'm coming out with. Although I said it was just going to be a trilogy, so many people said, "Joey, write another one, please." I somehow worked in the fourth one. But I'd like to let's get together again. First of all, I'll get together with you anytime you're fun to talk to. Yeah. But when the book comes out, I'm going to get you a copy and we'll discuss it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming down, and we'll see you later.
All right, my friend.